Hello, today I would like to talk about sowing onions. You can sow leeks in exactly the same way. The difference is really the sowing time. With onions, the traditional time is from December through to May. Obviously the later sowings you'll get smaller onions. With leeks you probably want to be thinking about sowing them somewhere between January and March. For ourselves, we usually sow our onions the second week of January, and the leeks we sort of sow just into sort of the second or third week of February. That works perfectly for us. That works perfectly for the plants that we actually sell on the nursery, and also the ones that we plant in our own veg garden. So from that point of view, a lot of people sow their onions very early. The traditional time was actually to do them Christmas Day afternoon, but I prefer to hold back just a little bit more because the light levels are improving a little bit, and you get a stockier plant, so they don't race away. They're a very, very easy thing to grow from seed. Talking about onions in particular here, though leeks are as well. I actually think it's better to grow onions from seed than from sets. There's no risk of them bolting because they're in their first year. They're very, very cheap to grow from seed. Buying the seed is quite reasonable, and it's a real hassle-free crop to plant, and you'll get just as big onions or even bigger. So from that point of view, there's no need to worry about using sets. Seed is the way to go. So moving on from that, how to actually sow onion seed, it's very, very easy. I've got here a tray of our seed compost, and I've literally just tamped it down. Just needs to be just lightly tamped, not too hard. The seed is quite small, and I can actually do with my glasses, which I'm just going to find. Wonderful. Seed is small, and I need my glasses now. And the seed actually looks like this. Okay, so it's like little bits of coal, I guess, is one way to describe it. So to sow the seed, and I'm just broadcast sowing onto a seed tray here. You could sow into pots, you could sow into modules. We always broadcast sow into seed trays, and we don't transplant until we actually physically plant them into the garden, or if we're actually sending these out. So there's no need to move them on and pop them on. They're growing here. They start as they germinate. They will literally look like blades of grass, I think is the best way of putting them. And then they thicken up. Provided you haven't sown the seed too thickly, which is an easy mistake to make, you're not going to have trouble pulling these out from here, even when they're sort of 4 to 6 inches tall, even a little bit taller, and thickening up. By then they look like spring onions. They're easy to then plant out. Or as I say, I'm actually sowing red Brunswick onion, and I'm sowing these would be the plants we'll be selling sort of Marchish sort of time. So as I say, all I'm doing at the moment is just sowing them direct onto the compost. I'm not a huge fan of sowing either onions or leeks directly into the garden, maybe spring onions later on, but even though the seed is reasonably cheap, it's too valuable to just sow it straight outside. You get a better plant, and you get an earlier plant. Obviously if you sow later, with the larger varieties, you're not going to expect to get such a large onion. But that doesn't mean that you can't keep on sowing, as I say, with the onions right through to May. With the leeks you can actually continue to sow a little bit later than March, but again they're not going to turn into huge great monster leeks, so it depends what you want. If you're doing spring onions, I would personally sow them direct outside, but if you wanted to do an early crop, as I say, there's no reason why you can't do the seed tray trick. So as you can see, I've got a reasonable spread of seed all over, which is quite easy. There's a few here and there in a little bit of depth, but that's me done there. And then you just need to cover them. Now, we cover them with vermiculite. The reason that we use vermiculite, and we actually use vermiculite on quite a lot of things now, as opposed to putting compost over the top or sieved compost, but the reason being is this will actually allow the seed to come through, allow the young seedlings to come through, and come through quite easily on their own. If you use compost, particularly if you sieve the compost, you tend to find that it forms a layer, a cap, and then as the seeds germinate, you sometimes find the whole layer lifts off like a sheet of carpet, I guess is a simple word, and then you have to spend a good half an hour or so fiddling around trying to tease the compost back to cover the seed and cover the root. Whereas with the vermiculite, it doesn't do that. It doesn't stick together, and you end up with a nice layer that will hold some moisture in, and also at the same time you're not going to get that capping problem. So you're not going to get the problem with the whole lot lifting in one go. I'm taking a little bit longer than I usually do on this because I'm chatting away to you, obviously. But we don't want to go too thick. That's the other thing we don't want to go, is too thick on here. Don't want to cover the seed too much, but don't want to go too thin either. The next thing I would do is gently press this down. Now, being super organised as I am, and because I'm keeping out of everybody's way for doing this clip, I've forgotten my press. So what I'd actually do is, we have a board that I will literally just come down and press this down, just to get the seed back into, or just to get the vermiculite into contact with the seed properly, just to push the seed gently into the surface. That's it done. As I say, I'm going to press that in a minute because I've forgotten my press. I'm going to put that onto our propagating benches. And for leeks and onions, you want to be running at around 15 to 20 Celsius. So you can actually go a little bit colder, but it will take longer for the seed to germinate. But here at the nursery we actually germinate at 18 Celsius, but 15 to 20 is fine, which is in old money 60 to 70 Fahrenheit. So anywhere in between there is completely fine. Like I say, we're going to give that a firm. We're going to give it a water. It's going to go onto one of our prop beds with basal heat. And this tray, at that sort of temperature, I'd like to think the seed will be up in a couple of weeks. As soon as it's germinated, we will take it off the heat, because we don't want to keep on throwing a lot of heat at the base and then getting leggy seedlings. And we'll keep them in our frost protected greenhouse here, so they're going to continue to grow at around about 7.5 Celsius, something like that. So not really warm. That's the minimum temperature they go down to. Obviously in the day it'd be warmer than that, but that would just allow them to grow away nice and gently, and these would be ready to plant out sort of end of March, beginning of April. That's it really. It's as easy as that for sowing onions, and it's as easy as that for sowing leeks.